And as we start every workshop training, we like to acknowledge the land, but we are starting to expand these land acknowledgements to being more than just calling out the indigenous lands that we're on, to honoring the original inhabitants of this land, but also challenging each of us to learn more about who were the original inhabitants of this land. So I'd like to invite you, if you're here in San Diego, there's the Museum of Us that has a wonderful exhibit. They've gone through a very lengthy decolonizing process. There's also mission trails that are on the land of the Kumeyaay. There's Kumeyaay Community College. There's Verona Museum. So there are a lot of local places, and we'll make sure you have this information, but we want to move beyond just acknowledgement to what can we do to learn more about those who have honored this land for so many years. And our agreements today are, as they are, your computer is lit today. Also very excited that Louise will be presenting, I'm sure. So these are always our community agreements. However, if there's something here, if these are new to you, and there's something that you see that we have not called out, please let us know in the chat, and we're happy to add that. Right now, this is called a community of practice. Personally, I feel like that has become an overused term, and I like to think of this as a collective. We're learning from one another. In no way do Melissa and I situate ourselves as the experts and you all as the learners. You all are doing the work in districts, so we're learning together. We see ourselves as a bridge between application and theory. So please let us know if there's something here that we can add. If you're good, you can either put a heart or a thumbs up or, hi, Layla. All right, we're good? Okay, so we're going to move on quickly because, as I said, we have a wonderful guest who's going to share what is happening in real time in the district. As always, we like to really highlight these SEL 3 signature practices. We do acknowledge that the thought of lifting work right now in districts can seem daunting and overwhelming, but these 3 signature practices are great ways to start to embed and infuse SEL work inside your system. So it is our goal that in every session, we will highlight ways to that you can do this in your own context, so in your classroom or in your staff meetings, but we will always try to call out at least one of these signature practices as we move through our time together. And today our welcoming activity is about celebrations and gratitude. During the month of November, we do recognize that it is a time that people set aside to really think about what they're grateful for and have gratitude. So we thought we would do that in our SEL work this month to really highlight what is working in your system, hence Appreciative Inquiry. And before we dive into that, we would like to have our welcoming activity also center around celebrations and gratitude. So this quote, would someone like to read this quote for us?
Celebrations and gratitude. It had long since come to my attention that people of accomplishment rarely sat back and let things happen to them. They went out and happened to things.
That's right. So things that happen don't just happen. Folks like you who are in this room, you know what needs to happen. You're movers and shakers, and you're going to find a way to make sure that our children are taken care of, that our families are honored. So with that said, our welcoming activity, you are going to go into a breakout room and talk about the things that you've happened to. You're going to lift up an accomplishment or something that you're proud of in your system. Again, this could be a classroom, this can be a site, this can be a district, but we really want to pause for a second and celebrate what good is happening in your system. So don't be coy. The next slide is going to give a little bit more information, but don't be shy. Don't say, oh, it's not that big of a deal. We were already moving this way. No, we want you to take the time right now to share out with a partner in a breakout room those things that you've happened to. So we'd like for you to share one accomplishment of your SEL work that you're proud of. Nothing is too small. Please don't think it has to be something very big and grandiose. But what have you accomplished that you're proud of? So Melissa's going to put us into breakout rooms. Am I missing something? Or are we on target? All right. We'll play a little music as we go. To be able to brag on yourself a little bit.
I'll share. It just felt nice to be able to share in general about some of these things that we get each other in some things. So just nice to share with other people who have some of the same kind of feelings about stuff.
Thank you. Was the purpose of that welcoming activity clear? Yeah, okay. And then you don't have to share this out, but think about how you can bring this back to your workplace. So one of our goals in this, in these conversations, these monthly community of practice, is to think about little quick tools that we can implement in our context the very next day. It doesn't have to be this giant implementation plan approved by the board. There are actually little practices that we can start to implement. So we're hopeful that this activity is something you can take back in. It can be used with students, it could be used with adults, it could be used with leaders. So thank you so much for participating. All right, so our outcomes for today, as always, we want to establish a shared, safe community of learning. Again, this is reciprocal learning. So we are learning from you, and we're hopeful that we can give information that you find useful. We want to connect appreciative inquiry and transformative SEL implementation. Reason being is because we're already doing great work in our districts, and we don't want you to feel like you're putting on the next best fashion, right? The next greatest thing. We want you to see that there are pockets already in your system that you can lift up, that you can celebrate what's happening, that may be a natural entry point and connection to SEL implementation. We always like to share resources and tools for implementing SEL in your context or in your organization. And then again, I don't even know why I have to say this again, but we want to continue to foster a reciprocal learning space. So those are our outcomes for today. And just as a reminder, I'm not going to read this definition, but if you are new, our stance with SEL is through the lens of transformative SEL. We're not just here to talk about the competencies without talking about the inequities that persist in public education. And through our work, we're going to continue to critically examine the root causes of those inequities. And then as we begin to build out our SEL work, we want to attend to those issues, like it says here, of identity, agency, and belonging, to address those issues as power, privilege, prejudice, discrimination, social justice, empowerment, and self-determination. So those are always our goals, and that's what this work is grounded in. Next, most people are familiar with the Castle Wheel, but again, this is our framework. This is, while we use other research and we really want to give a holistic view, really our work is pretty much anchored in the framework that Castle has built out along with the California Department of Education. So what we thought we'd do, we didn't want to take it for granted that everyone knew what appreciative inquiry is. And if you don't, that is fine. We have a really brief video that will highlight it. But essentially what it is it's looking through an asset-based or strengths-based lens. So in education, we're attacked a lot, right? Constituents, folks from the outside telling us what we should do. And as it was shared earlier, we don't often get to pause and say, wait a minute, we are doing some things well. So we're hoping that today's conversation and the work that we're doing today we'll be able to do that more, but we thought it would be really helpful to just give you a brief overview of where this framework came from and really what it is saying.
All right, fingers crossed. Oh. Didn't cross enough fingers. See if I stop my video.
Appreciative inquiry is a philosophy and a process for harnessing the strengths and experiences of everyone in the system in order to build a desired future. It's particularly effective at injecting energy and optimism when the need for change has been identified. Recognising that all of us are smarter than one of us and that people that help create change are more likely to own the change, AI is an evolving approach to transformation. It takes the best experiences of everyone and applies them to achieve end results. It focuses the mind on key questions such as, where do we want to go? And how will we get there? Through this approach, we avoid getting bogged down by obstacles and instead work together towards a common goal. At Aspire to Be, we believe that success is built upon the process of learning from past experience. Only when you have learned how to do it well can you truly determine how it can be done better or more efficiently. Appreciative inquiry provides a positive, practical and contextualised approach, allowing organisations to analyse their working environment by using a simple and focused outcome-based methodology. The power of this strength-based practice is that it can be applied to any aspect of work and can be used in anything from team meetings right up to large-scale cultural change programmes. It's critically important for an organisation to develop people capability and capacity to foster and stimulate growth. For appreciative inquiry to be successful and to instigate meaningful change, there are 6 key phases, each informing the next. AI is ideal for establishing vision and big picture thinking, even with people who have never met before. Even a large group will understand in a very short time that they share a lot of common ground. This phase is define and is crucial as it outlines the programme's core purpose and objectives. Next, we bring people together to identify what has already worked well and the factors that contributed to the success. This phase is discover, and it allows contributors to identify achievements and ways of working that will be valuable moving forward. Information from the discover phase is then used as a platform to speculate on possible or desired futures. Key themes are transferred into statements of strategic and social intent. In the dream phase, the value lies in the connections people see, relating to where they want to go and what they want to take with them. Participants then co-construct a new reality based on the dream phase, applying direction, principles, and a strategic framework. Questions asked in this, the design phase, relate to what would be ideal, how we make it work, and what conceptual behaviour or operational changes we would need to facilitate. The achievements made through the process are affirmed by tracking the journey on the programme with the team. The deliver phase identifies how change will be delivered, embedded, and how it will spark cultural transformation within the organisation, capitalising on proactive observation to continually inform the process. Stakeholder engagement and a two-way communication is critical to successful programme delivery. In the develop phase, assessing against the original objectives, along with target changes that may occur along the way, we identify and evaluate outcomes to map opportunities for progression, whilst consolidating the foundation upon which transformational change takes place. So why do we use AI? Simply because this methodology provides the vehicle for organisational growth by establishing an ongoing maturity model which sees culture at the very centre of performance improvement.
Okay. Oh. Woo. It is just working overtime today, isn't it?
Right.
So we hope that that video gave, a brief explanation. There's a lot of different models for Improvement, continuous improvement. There's so many different improvement models out there, but we know that everybody's in a very different place when it comes to their SEL work and SEL implementation. And right now, because I don't know any other word than heavy, we all feel very weighted down right now. We thought that this was a great framework because it starts with the positives. It looks at our assets and the assets of the individuals in the system, and it frames that as a way for us to collectively work together to move forward. So the two key questions that we pulled out are, where do we want to go? So what's our ideal state? What's our vision? And I love the idea, like, dream big, because honestly, we don't know what's possible. There's so many more things that are possible than we could even think of in our narrow, knowledge right now. And so what's that large scale vision? And then taking those steps to figure out how we'll get there. And the culture eats strategy for breakfast. We know that shows up so much, but it's so true. And a couple of the key points that were made here, and we created this handy visual for you on the next slide. I love the fact that all of us are smarter than one. My passion for Ed Camp, the phrase is the smartest person in the room is the room. And there's so many people in your system who have knowledge, who haven't been tapped for it. They might not be advocating for themselves to be part of the work, or it just didn't seem like it was, their cup of tea. And there's a lot of collective brilliance out there. We know the second bullet point I love because it's the same thing with working in the classroom. If your students are helping create the change, they're going to own the change. Anybody who's involved in making those changes will be more likely to support it in the long term. And then culture's at the center. So this has to be seen as something that is everyone's collective work, as opposed to something that's being done to them. So we took the model and made our own visual, because a lot of the ones out there weren't the most visually pleasing, I guess is a nice way of saying it. But the important part is that this is an ongoing cycle, and that, we're never perfect. Nothing's perfect ever in the system. And so we always have to be looking at, we throw that develop in, even though you're often seeing this as a 4 or 5D model. That 6D is so important because it's really looking back and saying, did we meet our goals? And if not, what do we need to do to get there? So we have defined that core purpose and our focus of SEL work, which some of you might have already done that and gotten there. There's thinking about what's already worked well and what got us to that success. And, a lot of times we focus on our successes, but we don't do the difficult part of analyzing what it was that made us successful. Unfortunately, it's often a person. And so we have that cult of personality where if that person leaves, we won't have that success. So really analyzing what made us successful so that it can be replicated within our site, within our system, amongst our schools, with our students and families. Dream. I've been involved in some improvement work, and the people leading it said, dream big, think big. You never know what someone will say, if someone will say yes or no until you ask them. And so thinking what could be those large possibilities that are out there. Designing a new reality, what we could do to make this work, what would be obviously ideal, which we hear across our county and across the state, and I think the country, that what would be ideal is if we had enough people to fill positions, but we don't right now. So what can we do with where we are? And what changes might make that possible? And then deliver. How is it going to be embedded? And I love this line, how will it spark cultural transformation? And then feedback. There always has to be an opportunity for feedback so that you can ensure whatever work you're doing actually meets the needs of those in the system. And so we've talked before with our group about student voice and really thinking about how all of those who are almost the recipients of this work are being involved in making those changes, giving feedback, ensuring that it's meeting everyone's needs. Lindsay, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add.
I think you hit it.
Okay. So if you go to the agenda, you'll see there at the top is a link for the note-taking document. or that, sorry, the Appreciative Inquiry document. So if, yes, okay. I will put that in the chat as well. It should be a forced copy. And so when you open that up, at the very top, you'll have this graphic because we want to make sure that people had it accessible to think through. But you may be familiar if you attended our webinars in the spring. This is our simplified version of some of the CASEL rubrics that exist for implementing SEL and planning for your system. And so we wanted you to take a moment, and we're going to open out some breakout rooms to have a collaborative conversation. And again, we're thinking through an assets lens. So it's easy to go to what we don't have and what we aren't doing well, but really starting from what is already a success and building upon that will help us continue our work. So thinking about what's going well and what you could build upon, and we'll give you an opportunity to self-select. We can help you if you need that help, into a room with people who are grappling in the same area as you. So those three areas, again, are build foundational support and plan. So that's really rallying people around it, creating a vision for SEL, adult SEL, if that's a focus right now for your district or your team, is supporting the adults in the system so that you can support the students. But maybe you've already put those in place and you're working on student SEL, how to ensure that you have the adults to support those students, or thinking about how you're integrating that into academics. So we're going to open the breakout rooms, and hopefully everyone has done the self-select. If not, if it doesn't show up for you, if you want to put your name in the chat and which one you want to go into, and we will help you out there. So I'm going to open them. And so that is my segue to Luis Lopez, Lord computer, with Sweetwater. He's going to talk us through their process of how they worked on their implementation planning, how they started that foundational support and planning, and where they are right now in the process. So I'm going to turn that over to Luis and just tell me next, and I will move the slides along.
Thank you, Melissa and Felicia, for hosting us in the community of practice. And thank you guys for being the community of practice. I love every single one of you because of all the work we're doing together, learning from each other, and really appreciate the questions that we're asking, because each one of the steps that led us to today to be able to support students systemically with SEL started with the question that led to the next question, right? So if you go next slide, please, Melissa, I wanted to share with you a little bit about our journey so far. And, regardless if you're in an administrative role, a teacher, paraprofessional, it's us making things happen, right? Because all of this stuff didn't happen because somebody said, I'm going to make it happen. It happened because people came together organically and said, this is what we need right now, right? We took action. So early in 2017, the Sweetwater story is before action, we needed a vision. So we started a series of stakeholder meetings and listening tours to figure out what is that people want and need. And it came out that we really want all of our students to succeed. We want these welcoming, inclusive atmospheres where every student has a chance to approach and achieve their dream. And that eventually turned into our mission and belief statements for Sweetwater that allowed the allocation for resources to support SEL district-wide, and turned into the question of, if we have this district vision and mission, how does this happen at our sites? Well, we developed their mission and vision. Right, we created the reality into language first before putting it into action. And so now we have allocations for supporting systemic SEL throughout the district and throughout sites, and in our district office, we have ongoing development of SEL resources, right? It brings us to today. But it all started with the question. You go to the next slide, please, Melissa. How do we support students' social and emotional learning and academic outcomes? Well, it's a much more complex question than just creating lessons. It takes a whole system. It takes our social emotional well-being, something we were talking about in the adult SEL group, right? If you don't feed the teachers, they'll eat the kids. We don't want that, right? We want to make sure that we're all well. And what does it mean to be well in a system? Well, then the word well-being, how is the system itself? It's made up of people. How are the people in the system? Because what's happening in the classroom is a reflection of what's happening with us. So taking into this question, it came very clear. I could create SEL lessons and send them out throughout the district, no problem. I love doing it. Writing SEL lessons is fun because you end up learning the process. But to impact systemic change, it's going to take much more than somebody working by themselves, just a single site. It's going to take multiple departments and multiple levels working together. So through appreciative inquiry, how do we work together to meet these outcomes that we want for kids? Next slide, please, Melissa. So that led us to the next question. How do we break the silos in our system to create a sense of systemic well-being? Well, let's look at the whole picture. What's a site comprised of? So our team of different stakeholders, from our program manager for youth and student transitions, Mariana Gomez, myself, Reed Burns, who's the program manager for the behavior intervention specialist, Sonia Picos, who's our director of student support services, community agencies like the National Conflict Resolution Center, our suicide prevention coordinator, psychology special assignments, our counselors. Nobody told us to come together. We came together because we had the same question. How do we break the silos at the district central office level to support everything that happens as a site, right? Because I had this question, what would be the point? And I think about all of the challenges we've had before, right? I'll start with a deficit, but I'm going to go to a positive. And I'm sure we've had this before. We're working with the classroom and we're focused on our content area. And I say, I'm here to teach my content. And I'm not a language teacher. I'm not a behavior teacher. I'm not teaching kids restorative practice. Social emotional, that's a parent's job. I'm not going to teach ELD because I'm here to teach my content. And I'm going to do what I can for my SPED kids, but I'm not a SPED teacher and I'm not responsible for suicide prevention. Now flip it. Are we not? Because if we want our kids to achieve academic success for college, career, life preparedness, I am a language teacher because my kids can't approach reality without the language to understand it. I'm a behavior teacher because they need the behaviors to be able to approach the learning. I am doing restorative practices because harm happens in the classroom and relationships need to be repaired at times. I am teaching kids social emotional skills because that's the only possible way they'll achieve their dreams. I am an ELD teacher because we all need language scaffolds. We're all English learners. I'm a SPED teacher too because I need to meet my students where they're at and acknowledge the skills that they need to develop, right? And I am responsible for suicide prevention when my kids walk into my classroom. Now, if every single one of us could say that, we would have got it done, right? If we recognize that academics is not separate from behaviors or mental health and wellness, and it lays on a foundation of equity, social, emotional learning, and our restorative practices, then we can prevent a lot of the inequities. We can enrich students with the rigor that they deserve, and we can intervene effectively when it's not happening. So at least we came together and shared that vision. Next slide, please. And that led to the next question. If that's what happens, then how could we share perspectives? How could we share perspectives on what a site looks like? Well, let's look at it as a team. Let's get a board up there and think about everything that happens at a school and what it would take for us to work across silos at a school site. So we looked at things we needed to be explored, things that needed to be installed, things that needed to be implemented, and questions that we had around it, as well as the data we would need. And we played around with these stickies until we thought about the yellow would be all the things that we need to start doing as a leadership team at a site. We need our foundational learning. Then we looked at, well, if we wanted to install things, what would we want adults on the campus to do? Well, we got to feed the adults, right? They're not just going to buy into SEL, RP, and all these interventions. We need to support them as well. And then what's the data going to say? What fidelity indexes do we have? What behavior data do we have? What SEL universal screeners do we have to show the need? So we make the problem visible. And then looking at the green tier, well, what are we going to implement? What would we put in place to help somebody be that teacher who approaches equity in the classroom? Here's what we discovered. Next slide, please, Melissa. Thank you. That is messy. That is messy. And again, I know it's a slide and we spent a couple hours moving stickers around until we thought we got it. And that came to this. Well, let's say we did do all these things. What should a kid be able to say at their school? Well, I would love to say that any student at the school I worked at would be able to say that their culture is embraced, that they have a trusted adult, that everyone treats them like their own child, like they're recognized by their strengths and appreciated, and that discipline and conflict is seen through a behavior, through a restorative lens, that they're being taught social and emotional skills for building community, and that everyone greets them with kindness, compassion, and respect. Now, wouldn't it be wonderful if kids could say that? And take it another level, would it be wonderful if all of our adults could say that as well? Next slide, please, Melissa. So that led us to the next question. What do we have? What do we have that's working? Well, we've been doing restorative practices and SEL for quite a couple of years now, and we have behavioral supports in place. We have a behavior intervention team. We have mental wellness and crisis intervention teams. Are we working together? And what are we all doing to support all the students in our district, some of the students in our district, and those few students that need specialized supports? And where is it happening? How are these supports happening in the classroom? How are they happening at the school level? And how are they happening at the district level? That's our investigation. Next slide, please, Melissa. So we mapped it out. We took the question of all of these things that kids would be able to say, if they had them, what would happen? They would have academic achievement. We could eliminate that predictability of success, maybe solve some of that disproportionality, hopefully increase that school connectedness that leads to improved well-being for all. Next slide, please, Melissa. So again, hope these slides don't intimidate, but just wanted to share the thinking of about a year's worth of work. This was an MTSS organically put together team thinking about everything that we have and what it would take for those outcomes to happen for people, for students, for adults to say these things. And the good news is that we have the practices. Now here's the challenge. Next slide, please, Melissa. We have menus of supports. These are all of the universal needs. After surveying various sites across the district, these are the things, the services, the practices that need to be shared with all sites and departments. Everything from collaborative and proactive solutions to restorative practices to explicit SEL instruction to implicit bias training to culturally responsive teaching. It's a lot, right? So our next appreciative inquiry question. Next slide, please, Melissa. This is the question we're attempting to address this year. What is our approach to developing a site-specific, data-driven, integrated implementation plan? How will district teams go and support sites like that, which I described to you, that integrates the whole thing, that doesn't separate academics from behavior, social emotional learning, but integrates them, that doesn't look at it as individual needs, but whole system needs? Next question, once that site decides what it needs, what supports are going to be provided? How will we assess with the assessment? Who's going to do the data? How will we plan? And how will we do technical assistance? What we discovered is that we don't have a resource or strategy problem. We have a culture of improvement that we need to develop. Next slide, please, Melissa. And so that kind of left us with this thinking, right? To add what you said earlier, culture strategy for breakfast, innovation for lunch, and transformative SEL for dinner. So we're in the phase of, we want to build a culture of improvement at sites. We're not there yet, but we're learning by doing, by going to sites and asking what you need, doing a site support protocol, looking at the strengths and seeing what are our areas of need by priority, and then innovating with the stakeholders of the site. Now, we haven't gotten to the transformative SEL work yet, but we're paving the way because we know here in this group that with transformative SEL, we can unlock a lot of these goals that we all have. So, thank you for the opportunity to share and just let you guys know we're all trying different things and we're all learning. And to be honest, we don't have the answers, and just acknowledge that. But together in this community, we can share our wisdom because every single person in this room has had mentors, has had teachers, has read books, right? And that's how much wisdom is in this room. And I think that's what it's going to take for us to be able to unpack this thing once and for all, right? We've had these practices forever. How do we make them stick? So thank you guys for allowing me to share.
Thank you.
We're going to ask if you're okay, Luis, if anybody had questions or wanted some more specific details. Give an
Yes,
opportunity.
any questions would be fine. And I know I threw a lot out there, so we might need a little process time. I tend to have a high capacity for overwhelm, but my email is, I'll put my email on the chat. Happy to hop on a call with you and dialogue as well if you'd like to ask some questions later as well.
Well, I encourage you to reach out to Luis. He is just a wealth of information and does the hard work and has done an amazing job bringing together a team of people who can collaborate and achieve this work. I think if you look through the organizer for the Build Foundational Support and Plan, one of the key pieces is having a cross-departmental team. And we try and model that at SDCOE with Felicia and I, but doing that within the district to make those changes happen, you know, all of the adults in the system have to understand what SEL is to be able to support it and to speak to it, especially since there are so many people getting it confused with other acronym-based educational changes. So being able to speak to what SEL is, what it looks like in the classroom, what it means for adults, what it means for curriculum, assessment, how it relates to mental health and all of those different areas. So we focus a lot when we talk about adult SEL. It's really having that team across your system and making sure that all of the adults understand what it is and what it can and should feel like.
Thank you, Melissa. I really appreciate what you guys shared in the beginning of making things happen. We're in the making things happen phase, right? So thank you guys.
So we wanted to take a moment. We added this in at the request last time, and just looking at the COP that happened in the spring to think about what needs exist that we might not cover in each session. And so in that same vein, where'd it go? There it is. So we started with talking about, you know, assets-based inquiry, but we wanted you to take this opportunity to learn from each other. So if you want to just take a minute, unmute, and I will stop the recording so everybody feels very comfortable.